This theme, tensions in the Middle East have reached a perilous point, with the United States now directly involved in the escalating conflict between Iran and Israel. US airstrikes have targeted Iranian nuclear facilities, prompting Tehran to vow retaliation and triggering sharp international criticism, including from South Africa. Iran's ambassador to the UN has labelled the strikes as blatant aggression, whilst President Donald Trump has spoken openly about regime change in Iran. Israel, meanwhile, continues its military campaign against high-profile targets in Tehran. With fears growing of a broader regional war and its global repercussions, we're now joined by Jeenah, who's a senior researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, MISTRA, to unpack the implications of this fast-moving crisis. Naeem, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter.
So you've described the trajectory of this conflict as extremely dangerous. What, in your view, makes this moment different from past escalations between Israel and Iran?
Well, in the past, it's been mostly kind of rhetoric. What we now have is actually we're on the cusp of a fully blown war between Israel and Iran. Starting with, of course, just about a week and a half ago, the illegal attacks, really, by Israel on Iran. They claim they were preemptive strikes and danger from Iran to Israel. And preemptive strikes are not protected under international law. It's a violation of international law. But what makes this moment even worse now is the involvement of the United States. The global superpower that could actually have played a role in terms of de-escalating has now escalated it further with the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. And then this morning, Donald Trump tweeting supporting regime change in Iran. The result of that, if Iran hasn't yet retaliated against the American strikes, they're thinking about what to do. But when you bring in a regime change objective into it, Iran's retaliation could see, in a sense, the whole region going up in flames. Iran has threatened the Straits of Hormuz, as your report said. They said that they could attack American bases in the region. In neighboring countries, there's 19 American bases with tens of thousands of American soldiers who could be attacked, and that could be very serious. I don't think we've been previously in decades at this point.
So a couple of questions come to mind. You've mentioned regime change. Both Israel and the US are talking about limiting and destroying Iran's nuclear capability. What do you think is really going on? What's the real motive for Israel and the US?
I think in some ways the motives are different between the two. So for Israel, what Netanyahu and his government want actually to do is they want to completely weaken Iran to the point that Iran becomes a vassal state with no capabilities, not only no military capabilities or nuclear capabilities, but a weak state. I mean, Netanyahu has said previously, referred to the so-called Libyan option. We know what Libya looks like now. It's a state. That's what they want to see happening in Iran. So I don't think the Israelis really care what regime is in power, but the state itself must be completely destroyed. Now, unfortunately for the Israelis, Iran is not Libya and it's not Iraq. The U.S., I think the objectives of Trump, I say Trump because he seems to be making all the decisions on behalf of the government, and his objectives are a bit confused. I mean, for one thing, he wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and he thinks that making a deal with Iran would get him that. Well, he's now bombed Iran and is now threatening regime change. He wants to be seen as the master of the deal. He wants to make a deal with Iran that would suit him, but at the same time, he wants the Republican Party and his electoral base together, and that base is split. We have within the Republican Party now a group that is the kind of traditional neoconservatives who see the U.S. as the policeman of the world, go everywhere with military adventures to keep people in line and bring democracy to the world, as they would say, and to support Israel 100% unquestioned. The other part of that base of Trump is the so-called MAGA faction, which is very much more America first. They don't believe that the U.S. should be getting involved in wars outside of the United States, that they should be focusing internally rather than externally. And they also don't believe that the U.S. should unquestioningly support Israel. And we've seen that, for example, those clips of Tucker Carlson's interview and others in the White House. So Trump is keen to keep these two factions together, and that's partly why we also hear kind of contradictory statements from him. One day he says no regime change, and literally within hours he calls for regime change. So it's uncertain about where Trump wants to go, and that, I think, makes the whole situation even more dangerous.
I'm trying to gauge international reaction to this. South Africa, very clear about its position. The other superpowers, big nations, seem to be struggling with how to deal with this particular crisis, especially now that the US is involved. What's your take on the international response?
So I think that the way we're seeing things falling, in broad terms, not absolutely, but in broad terms, there's a global South response and a global North response. The global North is uniting behind Israel and the United States. So we found, for example, that immediately after Israel launched its attacks on Iran, as I say, illegal under international. Before Iran even responded, the German Foreign Office issued a statement saying that Iran has a right to defend it, Israel has a right to defend itself, and that they condemn Iran's attack on Israel, when it was actually the other way around. The French president issued a similar statement thereafter. The UK issued similar statements thereafter. Now, with the American attack, we think kind of thing. These European powers, Germany, France, the UK, and others, lining up behind the US, even though the attack was illegal. Attacking nuclear facilities is banned under international law. They've lined up against them or behind the US. On the other hand, what we're seeing is that even in the region, every single country in the region, in the West Asia region, condemned Israel. Even now with the American attacks, I mean, a country like Saudi Arabia, which previously we might have said was U.S., is now no longer so. They're more interested in ensuring that there's stability in the region, and they condemned America's attacks, as did Turkey and others. And as you mentioned, South Africa. So we're finding that the responses are divided in this kind of way. And this is very interesting, because what it says is that the global North is really not interested in international law unless it's about them. International law shouldn't apply to the global South. They're willing to throw it out the window. And that includes, of course, African states. You have no more recourse as countries of the global South to international law if it's against a country in the. So this whole notion of a rules-based order, etc., after the mid-20th century, after the second big European war. All of that is thrown out the window because it's countries of the global south that seem to be flexing their muscles. And I think that this is quite scary for all of us.
There is fear about a regional war. How close are we to that?
Potentially quite close, but at the same time, it could be pushed quite far. I say potentially quite close because, Iran has said that if Israel stops its attack, Iran will stop. So at the moment, from the Iranian perspective, they see Israel towards them, and they believe that they are responding to those acts. It's not a full-scale war. It could become a full-scale war, and that could be disastrous in the region, but it could, to a large extent, remain between Israel and Iran. With the involvement of the United States, if Israel were to, and Iran's parliament yesterday voted that the Strait of Hormuz should be the Islamic Republic Guard Corps, the IRGC. Some commanders have called for attacking American bases in response to the attack. And especially, I think, the tweets this morning will strengthen that kind of position. Iran, of course, under Article 51 of the UN Charter, has the right to defend itself. If it does that, of course, if it doesn't defend itself, Iran is saying to the world that it's a patsy, that it can be walked over, or that's how they see it, that's the message they'll be giving. And so for them, not responding to the United States is worse than responding. So what does responding mean? If they go the whole hog, then attacking American bases in the region would result in a kind of regional war. It's not going to see any closer to overthrowing the Iranian government, but you could see a regional war taking place. On the other hand, Iran's National Security Council might decide to do the kind of thing they have done previously, which is communicate to the United States that they have to respond, and the response will be at a particular American base at a particular time. You remember after the U.S. under President Trump, Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. That's what happened. The Iranians responded, but they, through the Swiss, informed the Americans that they were going to attack a particular base on a particular day. The Americans evacuated the base. The base got hit, and the Iranians said, "Okay, we're done." That's another possibility. But if the rhetoric from Trump and from the U.S. increases, and if the attacks from Israel, then that possibility becomes more and more remote.
Inside Iran, what is the sentiment now towards the leadership there? And not everybody was enamored with their leadership, but has this changed the view slightly?
Well, I don't think it's changed the view of the leadership. So those who have been dissenters or dissidents, critical of the Iranian government, remain so. But what it's done is it's rallied Iranians around the flag. So even, 2 days ago, there were two issues, two letters that were published by two groups of female political prisoners, as they regard themselves as Iran, saying that they're in prison because they oppose the government. They'll be in prison. But they believe that Iran's changes should come from the grassroots and not externally, and they fully condemn the Israeli actions and support Iran in its response against Israel. That has been the kind of general feeling now. So you see these protests taking place, demonstrations taking place in Iran. All kinds of people who are present there, not all of whom support the government, but they support their society. Remember, Iranians are a very patriotic nation. Their patriotism goes back thousands of years. They had an empire, the Persian Empire. Israel is less than 80 years old. And that kind of patriotism means that they support their nation, even if they don't agree with the government.
And inside Israel, Tel Aviv, Netanyahu, how is he able to continue to convince Israelis that he's doing the right thing in the region as we see Tel Aviv getting hit by missiles and Israelis losing lives?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, remember that just before these attacks on Iran, Netanyahu was in quite a precarious position. Just 2 days before that, there was a vote in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, to dissolve the Knesset. If that vote had won, the parliament would have been dissolved. There would have had to be new elections, and according to polls, Netanyahu's party would not win. He, at the last minute, managed to win over, however he did that, 2 members of the opposition and just narrowly won that vote. But the vote was scheduled then to take place again. And, a good chance then that he would lose that vote and he would therefore no longer be in government. The opposition would win. He'd be dragged to court for all of his misdemeanors, corruption, etc., and have to spend some time in jail. So with the attack on Israel, we're seeing a different thing now. The Israelis, with the attack on Iran, Israelis have also rallied. And this is partly because for the past few decades, the kind of discourse in Israel has been very strong in painting Iran as an existential enemy, as being, against Western civilization, or frankly, against civilization, because only Western is civilization. And Iran as threatening the very existence of it. Until last year, Iran has never actually attacked Israel directly. Last year, the first time that Iran launched any missiles against Israel, and again, at this time, it was the Americans were informed, they informed the Israelis, they knew it was going to happen. It was after Iran attacked, and after Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria. I mean, no one can accept that the consulate would be. It was the first time since 1979 that Iran actually attacked Israel, right? Yet the discourse in Israel has been crafted in this way, that the only way that Israel cannot survive as long as Iran exists. And so when the attack on Iran took place a week and a half ago, that kind of psyche kicked in, and people rallied around for working towards getting rid of what they've been conditioned to believe is an existential threat to them.
And then perhaps finally, Washington, can Donald Trump continue to bypass Congress in the way that he has been for so long, pretty much since he came into office? But the stakes are just getting higher and higher now. That's a very good question. I mean, that's a should be answering through their representatives, but there seems to be a sense that the party, his own party in Congress, even though there are a number of people in that party that disagree with him, even on the attack on Iran, and frankly, that the next 3.5 years of his term could be disastrous for the Republican Party. I mean, there's a good chance midterm elections coming up. There seems to be some kind of a hesitation or perhaps even fear in the Republican Party, and so dissenters are generally quiet and they let him have his way. So there's this debate now about whether a president can launch a war against another country without the approval of Congress. Constitutionally, it seems Congress has to approve a war.
his supporters are arguing that this is not a war, etc., etc. But it seems for now, at least until the midterm elections, that he's able to get away with anything because there's some kind of a fear in the Republican Party to oppose him.
Naeem, always great getting your insights. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. Bye.
Yeah, that's Naeem Jeenah, Senior Researcher at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection, helping us make sense of this crisis in the Middle East, the US, Israel, and Iran at the moment. And one of the things that we certainly need to be watching is the oil price likely to spike as a result of this ongoing conflict. It's 8:30. It's time for you.